Gun control is one of the biggest domestic policy debates currently in the United States. It feels like every day as a gun owner, you're constantly being poked at for your choices and beliefs about guns. From mainstream media, social media, in real life interactions, your non-gun owning family feels like an endless barrage of questions and arguments thrown at you that tries to make you back down from a multitude of your own beliefs about guns. It can get overwhelming at times how many gun control talking points there are, so that's why I'm here today presenting a diverse and popular set of arguments against guns and challenge them from my point of view as a gun owner that also sees the Second Amendment as absolute. So how will we display all these common anti-gun slogans and sayings? Well, how about an iceberg I created with several arguments grouped up, personified, and ranked in rarity of how common you see the arguments in person or online. This isn't set up like a traditional iceberg. My video, my rules. Plus I spent like a couple hours making this cool iceberg instead of a boring Microsoft Word document. Anyway, this is Wubba Bubba going full steam ahead, crashing right into the gun control iceberg. Here before you is the iceberg, with 6 separate categories of arguments personified. They are from top to bottom, the diaper poopers, the anti-gun activist, mainstream media debunker, the expert politician, the globalist citizen, and the unhinged. I will go over a brief description of each one when we get further down in the iceberg. Also, if I use some weird language from time to time, I'm just trying not to get yeeted by YouTube. Now let's get right into it. Arguments that usually come from this group aren't that well thought out, merely conjured up in their colon in mere seconds or repeated from another pooper. Most who bring up these points don't even know the current gun control debate talking points, they just hate guns for one reason or another. These arguments are meant to provoke a response of angerment and instant shutdown to gun owners in their eyes, but alas, these arguments fall flat on their face with only requiring a few seconds of brain power from someone, with even a moderate amount of knowledge of guns and gun issues. You'll see slight variance with this one, like naming a gun that exists, ones that don't, but usually they use 2 terms to describe certain guns with certain scary characteristics like a collapsible stock, that are synonymous with modern day semi-auto rifle platforms. The 2 terms most thrown around are the previously mentioned assault weapon and assault rifle. So let's tackle both of these terms before why I believe people have the right to own them or need them. Assault weapons is a term made up by politicians to scare the public of weapons that have detachable magazines, shoot 1 bullet with each trigger pull, and have accessories that makes the handling of the weapon more user-friendly. An assault rifle is a select fire rifle, which most civilian-owned rifles don't have, that takes a detachable magazine and shoots an intermediate bullet, a machine gun defined by the law. People scream these terms at anything that doesn't look like Uncle Bob's wooden rifles, mostly at the sight of America's most popular rifle platform, the AR-15, which isn't an assault rifle. Civilian AR-15 and other semi-automatic rifles sold on the market can only fire in semi-auto. 1 pull of the trigger equals 1 bullet that comes out of the barrel. Since what they think of when they say assault weapon is usually the AR-15, I'll just stick with that as my main argument for semi-auto rifles. Anyway, why do people buy them and what do they use them for? Like I said already, they are incredibly popular, making parts and accessories readily available and cheap. The custom nature of the rifle can make it a great choice for a plethora of uses. Plinking, training, competition, hunting, with tons of caliber choices, self-defense, and more. The handling of the firearm is very ergonomic and safe for the user. The recoil is low thanks to the commonly chambered 5.56 or 2.23, great for anyone with a smaller frame, even with firing a bullet every second. It can fill a void in any collection at almost any budget, the quintessential Swiss Army knife of the gun world. Another reason for owning an AR-15 or any other semi-auto platform is just because I want it. You own garbage you don't need, so kindly pound sand. Good luck banning most firearms that are commercially available. Millions of revolvers, pistols, shotguns, rifles being illegal overnight would be found 100% unconstitutional because semi-autos have been in common use for more than a century.
With an AR-15, let's say you shoot a deer, you can't eat it. Because you basically demolish the animal. In addition to that,
but the hunt is about...
The AR-15 doesn't shred animal meat or explode inside them. If you have two rifles with one being a bolt action and one being an AR, both being chambered in the same hunting caliber, both having the same barrel length, there will be little to no difference on how much it affects the target. It doesn't triple the velocity, it doesn't double the size of a bullet just because it's in an AR-15 over a bolt action.
If you got 12 rounds, it means you've already missed the deer 11 times.
This argument implies that if I miss my shot, I'm going to mag dump the deer until I hit it. The AR-15 being able to take a detachable magazine that can hold more than 5 bullets doesn't mean I'm going to use more than 5 or that I have terrible accuracy. Having the ability to make a quick, accurate follow-up shot for whatever reason is an upside to all hunts to ensure a clean kill. Also, by your logic, if you have a hunting rifle that holds 5 bullets, does that mean you think you can't take down your game with one shot because you chose that rifle over a single-shot rifle? That's how stupid this logic sounds. Let responsible, safe hunters use what they find most comfortable as long as the caliber and bullet fits the hunt. Says who, you? I'll buy whatever I want. Wait, that wasn't good enough for some of you gun grabbers? Okay, let's play a little game. Here's the only gun you're allowed to own, a Glock 19, great pistol. Here's a hunter's license and everything required to hunt a duck. Don't come back until you give me 3. No, they aren't. That's just ripped from action movies, not real life. But people being planked at may think it's a jackhammer. No, just no. Suppressors are honestly a great tool for every gun owner and should be deregulated. Even in countries with horrific gun laws, the government allows you to grab suppressors off the shelf. No one says remove a muffler because people might not hear a car coming for them. I legitimately believe that if we were in a different universe, gun grabbers would be saying that every person should have a suppressor permanently attached to a gun at all times.
And I thought, very interesting. This seems to me, putting my psychotherapist hat on, like compensatory behavior, compensating, right? Compensation behavior.
You own an AR-15? Ha! I'm now thinking about your wiener. This is the funniest attempt at humiliating gun owners. It never works. I've never seen a single person offended by this poor excuse of an insult. It makes them out as a creeper or a loser. Also, it instantly fails half the time online if the person you happen to brainlessly sling this at happens to be a girl. Why does my individual right of choosing what firearm I decide is best for me to protect myself from threats restricted when someone who doesn't follow the law commits a tragedy with guns they're not meant to have anyway? I am thinking about the safety of children. That's why I carry and own guns. This argument is just meant to play on emotional strings of horrific incidents to get me to compromise my rights away for acts I didn't commit. Evil people will commit evil acts no matter what. If you really wanted to think of the children's safety, you would arm responsible teachers that volunteer, that have proficient firearm training, like states already have, actually get to the root cause of what is driving people to do horrific acts with weapons, and instead of spending money on economic aid packages to countries that hate us, spend it on fucking securing our schools. Banning or restricting gun access to civilians who have continuously followed the law won't stop children from being hurt. Take your fake emotional shallow argument and shove it. Yes, they're dangerous. They're weapons. That's the point of owning one. It's a lethal self-defense tool, not a Nerf gun. The gun show loophole is a made-up term that doesn't even involve gun shows, and expressed by people who haven't even been to a gun show before. For the people who don't know what a gun show is like, I'll give a brief description. It's like a small vendor convention where multiple FFLs, aka people who sell firearms as a business, set up shop, competing against each other to bring competitively priced guns to customers. So a lot of gun control activists think you can just walk in, buy a gun from a dealer, and walk out without a background check. That is completely false. It is the same exact process as buying a gun at a gun store in your state. What they're actually thinking of is private sales. A private sale is when two individuals engage in a non-regular transaction of a firearm from one collection to another, as long as you know the other individual, to your best of knowledge, isn't prohibited from owning a firearm. This can happen anywhere, a Walmart parking lot, your parents' house, near a police station. To say that this only happens at gun shows is stupid. Okay, so you're asking me now, how are you going to defend private sales? It seems risky if you sell it to someone you barely know. Remember that you can refuse to sell to anyone you want. I believe that a typical gun owner selling through a private sale smelled something off. He wouldn't complete the transaction. I got a hunch and nothing else, but I think a criminal would prefer to steal a firearm or purchase one on the black market instead of overpriced pistols being sold by a retiree or a FUD. Plus, it makes it more difficult to complete a draconian searchable gun database that won't definitely be weaponized by domestic and foreign bad actors, but I'll touch upon that later in this video. We already have background checks. They may be confusing this with calls for universal background checks, but I'll get to that later in the video too. The type of people who usually use these arguments in this group are young kids propped up by grassroots anti-corporations to show that kids are hip and always right. A lot of arguments use a lot of emotional language, always on the attack with a lot more creative argument points than the previously shown segment. Most of the time, it's not spent on the gun itself, but the culture, history, your psychology, your ideas, all mind games to try and shut you down and implement self-doubt in your ideas and experience with firearms. Well, does their strategy and talking points work? No. All they got is the same prescripted lines uttered by Michael Bloomberg, which he himself and the groups he fund don't even know what they're talking about either. Now let's get back to the Iceberg and take a look at their most prevalent arguments. You deciding to serve your country and you choosing to own a gun for whatever reason are completely separate decisions. Most people aren't picking up a rifle to LARP as a man in the military, they're picking it up for self-defense, hunting, collecting historical pieces, and for competition target shooting. Any of these reasons are great reasons to own a gun and have absolutely nothing to do with serving our nation. Are you paranoid when you keep your door locked? Are you paranoid of your car battery dying if you have jumper cables in your car? The answer is no, you aren't severely paranoid, you are prepared. Most everyday carrying gun owners equip their gun without a second thought. It's like a routine. The only people paranoid are people who think everyone who carries a gun is evil. You could be right, but anyone who cherishes the safety and lives of others will take that gamble any day of the week. This reminds me of a great Bible verse. Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. The people that do lay their lives down for others, even to people that are complete strangers to them, are a hero in my book. Yeeting is wrong, but self-defense is justified. But what about one of the 10 Commandments? Well, one, there's translations with two different words that look similar but are actually very different. Secondly, if yeeting in any scenario was wrong according to God, why are there multiple people in the Bible like David and Samson given powers by him to fight for good and evil? It doesn't make any sense. The amount of people who use the Bible against Christians to do their bidding has been growing so much over the years, it kind of feels a bit satanic to me. This line of course relates to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Let's say I agree and believe it's just a document and should be shredded up. Great, so when I'm in power, I'm going to make you shut up because you don't have freedom of speech anymore, so I can't hear any of your stupid gun control measures anymore. What? You're saying that you don't like that? You believe everyone has a right to free expression? Okay then, you shouldn't hate this old piece of paper then. I really don't get how people heavily criticize one of the most profound articles in the world and cast it aside so readily. No, I don't, and the majority of US gun owners condemn gatekeeping gun culture based on race. A similar argument you hear a lot is, you would call for gun control if minorities got guns, and yet you see no calls to action from either gun owners or members of the NRA, the GOA, FPC, SAF, at all, despite the growth of the community from all types of different backgrounds. I will take any new aspiring gun owner to the range than a FUD any day of the week. So female civilians can't openly enter most schools, courtrooms, airplanes, post offices, and the Oval Office? Oh wait, they actually haven't gotten the Oval Office yet. Do you need a background check when you get transferred to a new husband? Is there a minimum height restriction on women? Do I need a permit to obtain a girlfriend in certain states? See how silly this argument sounds? A compromise to them is gun owners giving up access to a specific thing or making it harder to obtain a specific thing, and in return, they don't take anything else. That isn't a compromise, that's robbery. This is what a compromise should minimally look like. Everyone needs a license to own a gun, but then if you have the license, you can buy machine guns, short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, etc. Now, I wouldn't still agree to this because I think licensing is bad. I will explore this later. But this is what a true compromise would look like. Something that would never occur because in some way it gives gun owners a slight win, which is a no-go for most gun grabbers. This is just one of the dozen arguments people have against people who carry to protect themselves from wildlife, but this is the most prevalent and talked about one because other gun owners and even partly myself believe in this. Bear spray is a wonderful invention that can stop a giant piece of muscle ripping you into shreds, so why not give up the gun on the hike? Well, there is just a tiny problem. Bear spray success rate, if I use the most generous data I can find, is about 90 to 92% depending on what type of bear species. But what about that 10% chance that doesn't work? Wouldn't it be nice to have another ace up your sleeve like a 44 or a 10mm pistol instead of being a defenseless meat cube? An average person doesn't want to encounter a bear, let alone have to yeet one in self-defense. But if it's your life or the bear's, I reckon most people will find that choice really easy. These argument groups are espoused by either the mainstream media's controlled mouthpiece of the week, or someone who has their programming on 24/7. Most of their arguments tend to show polls, data, or fact checks relating to the positives of gun control and the negatives of individual gun ownership. These are probably the hardest arguments to combat, not really a hard bar to pass though, as you actually have to process the data thrown at you while they whip out another statistic that supports their cause. While it may take a little more time to process these arguments, they're still relatively easy to find misleading information and outright lies in the data given with your own research, general knowledge of gun stats, and real-world experience, something the mainstream media definitely doesn't get. Quick explanation of universal background checks for some of you guys not in the loop. All universal background checks mean that you have to do a background check for any firearm transaction, including private sales, which they think criminals abuse. So you're thinking, what's the downside of having a background check on every sale? Well, I have two main problems with this. Number one, this makes it harder to transfer a firearm to a friend or family member permanently or temporarily. You would have to go through a gun store or an FFL and do a background check between two people who already know they're not criminals. Do you think two criminals who don't follow the law will volunteer to do a background check in their deal? I've already touched upon this a bit earlier, but it's your private property. You should be able to sell or transfer it whenever, and gun owners have a lot more common sense when it comes to sniffing out good and potentially nefarious customers. Second, The only way to enforce universal background checks is to have a national digital gun registry that can look up who is supposed to own what firearm. Otherwise, this rule would be ineffective. The few anti-gunners who are still watching all this way might be saying, why don't you like a gun registry? Got something to hide? Why don't you like cameras in your bathroom? Got nothing to hide, right? This database would be ripe for the picking from hackers, criminals, and tyrants foreign and abroad. If this ever got leaked, it would be Black Friday for all evildoers at the expense of the people who are just following the law. Good thing we have laws against a gun registry. It's not like the ATF is trying to circumnavigate laws on the books, right? The weapons they can use vary from pistols, shotguns, rifles, and even knives. However, the ones that use scary black rifles that look like the movies are always plastered front and center on mainstream media to drive clicks and emotion. Even if you banned the scary black rifles, mass poopers will use any weapon they get their hands on, especially stuff that's way more dangerous and readily available.
Gun dealers in the Midwest and around the country that basically they're doing everything they can to get more guns in more hands of more people, and they don't care who's getting them and how they're going to be used. All they want to do is turn the profit.
Criminals break the law and obtain firearms one way or another. No way I couldn't have seen this coming. Most of this discussion is played out in Chicago, where guns are used often in crime that ends up with people leaving this world, sadly. So instead of blaming the criminal, they blame gun shops in Indiana with fewer restrictions that sell guns to people who do pass a background check and then give it to a criminal who wanted it, often referred to as a straw purchase. Straw purchases are inevitable. It happens everywhere, even in Illinois where you need permission from the government, a license, to even purchase a firearm. The amount of guns in criminals' hands being traded around is outstanding, especially Glocks with auto switches from China. The genie is already out of the bottle when it comes to guns and the plethora of ways criminals can obtain them. Restricting access in the neighboring state won't do jack crap, just making it harder for citizens who follow the law to arm themselves adequately. Lastly, I checked the ATF's website for the most recent data of recovered crime guns in Illinois, and I came across this gem. Even with some of the most harshest restrictions on firearms in the nation, a majority of guns recovered in Illinois from crimes originally came from Illinois. The mainstream media and its free-thinking viewers wave the specific study around about guns in the household make the environment more dangerous in order to dissuade owning a gun at all. I don't get why they throw this study around because I actually think it's one of their weakest. If you own a car, you are more likely to die in a car crash. If you're swimming in a lake, you are more likely to drown than someone not swimming. Accidents and tragedies do happen on accident. That's why you have to discuss firearm safety with your family to help prevent things like this from happening. Just like how you learn to drive safely, and then in turn, later in your life, you help your kids drive safely too. Quite the opposite. The number of unalives from guns is about 40,000 a year. Most of those are self-deletion. So you're telling me that a country with over 400 million guns that only results in 40,000 cases of bad things should be zero, but we don't live in a perfect world. When our population is ballooning north of 300 million people is bad, you're delusional if you think this heavily rigged data is indestructible. If you're anti-gun, you definitely don't want to check out the estimates of how many defensive gun use incidents there are each year. You probably won't like the results.
Gun violence is the #1 cause of death among kids and teens in the United States.
This study is full of shit. The study includes the ages of 1 to 19. 18 and 19-year-olds are adults. Why would they include this? Oh wait, gang-related activity affects mostly the ages between 17 and 19-year-olds. This also groups in self-deletion and justifiable self-defense, so this is the most carefully cherry-picked data to make it seem like kids are just leaving this world at an alarming rate. If you want a more in-depth explanation, Colion Noir made an excellent video on this pile of dog turds that does a great job tearing this sucker apart. It says well-regulated militia in the Second Amendment, so that means regulations are a-okay. Regulated meant in good working order back in the day, a completely different meaning to our modern use of the word. These grammar mind game these people play to get you to back down are stupid. The Second Amendment couldn't be any clearer. They focus so much on the first half, which actually means people being ready to take arms at a moment's notice so that they hope you forget about the second half. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Are you telling me that California, Illinois, and New York are safer than states like Wyoming and New Hampshire? You mean so-called dangerous gun nut states in which more than half of their population publicly state that they own a firearm, and yet are some of the safest states in the Union? Give me a break. Anti-gunners can pelt me with all they like with other dog crap studies, surveys, and data, but this lacks any real-world truth. States with draconian gun laws just happen to be the same fucking states that are constantly being ridiculed on how much they suck, especially in the crime department. Don't talk to me about dangerous when the states and cities you praise for taking a stand against gun violence have constant violent political riots and looting that go unchecked and unpunished by the law. Gun-friendly states are dangerous, my ass. This group is made up mostly of political stars and lawmakers that act like they know what they're talking about when it comes to the topic of gun issues. They will present their ideas as common sense, politically achievable, even nuanced, as they are definitely pro-Second Amendment and hunted all of their lives. Heck, they might sprinkle in some little history lesson about how the founding fathers would have said they agreed with them. Damn, they must be right. While trying to win over the hearts of Americans, they're voting tax dollars, by making themselves sound like they're the man to tackle gun problems, you expose yourself as a clown that knows jack shit about anything.
I said, Jill, if there's ever a problem, just walk out on the balcony here, or walk out, put that double-barrel shotgun and fire 2 blasts outside the house. I promise you, who's ever coming in is not going to. You don't need an AR-15.
The best bill
Do you
they
know
could
what a
get
barrel
out at that
shot
particular
is?
time. I actually don't know what a barrel shot.
Okay,
I
'cause it's in
believe
your
it's a shoulder thing
legislation.
that goes up.
No, it's not.
These politicians will also triple down on false statements even when confronted with simple retorts. Their line of thinking of repeating the same thing over and over are so bad that even politically motivated fact checkers are forced to intervene on their rhetoric. That expert badge they so metaphorically wear should be replaced with a dunce hat. Enough rambling, let's jump right back into the iceberg.
So more parents, teachers, police officers, health providers, and counselors know how to flag for a court that someone is exhibiting violent tendencies, threatening classmates, or experiencing thoughts that make them a danger to themselves and others, and temporarily remove that person's access to firearms.
Red flag laws are a process that inherently violates your Fourth Amendment rights. That's just how they work. So police, family, friends, your boss, your ex, anyone who knows you personally can petition a court with one-sided evidence to take your weapons for an indefinite amount of time without you being charged for anything. The idea is that you may be committing a crime in the future or may be committing a crime at the time, but there is not enough evidence to prosecute you, so let's trample on your rights in the meantime. This is literally future crime bullshit you see in science fiction. Also, a lot of red flag law orders target people who are suffering or are thinking about self-deleting themselves. So this actually in turn makes it less likely for someone to tell them your problems in fear of losing their firearms. Instigating an armed standoff over trying to take someone's weapons when they are not themselves is a recipe for disaster. We need an actual system that treats mental illness without the fear of losing certain rights. I don't know how this should be done or implemented, but one thing I'm sure of, red flag laws suck. By literal definition given us by the law, no it isn't. Your finger pulls the trigger each time. The stock just makes you hit the trigger faster. Heck, you don't even need a bump stock to recreate this. No matter how butt mad you are, it by definition doesn't convert a regular semi-auto rifle into a machine gun.
There's no reason someone needs a weapon of war with 100 rounds, 100 bullets that can be fired.
It takes literal seconds to reload magazines. Standard capacity mags are just more convenient to use. Anti-gunners think limiting the magazine will create a window for victims to run or tackle an evildoer, but like I said, it takes less than 2 seconds to reload if you train, so evildoers will just buy or steal a bunch of 10-round magazines if they were banned. Also a reminder that all a magazine contains is a very few parts, making it something not that difficult to produce or modify an existing magazine, so banning standard capacity magazines only punish law-abiding citizens. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I'm going to say it again. I don't need to give you multiple reasons why I need or own one. Cope and Sneed.
Hunter, I was out this weekend for pheasant season. I think the vice president and I are the first Democratic ticket that we're both gun owners, and we believe in the Second Amendment, but there are common sense things like enhanced background checks to keep guns out of the hands of the wrong people, and extreme risk.
When I hear this saying, I laugh each time. When people say they're pro 2A and then they say, but, they usually mean they have one rifle, one pistol, or one shotgun, collecting dust for periodic hunting trips. The but is usually followed up with calls for bans or calling for a gun buyback or something along those lines, which I believe are completely against the Second Amendment, so you can't say you're pro 2A. I think their problem is they forget that the Second Amendment doesn't have the word hunting in it. It's not about hunting. It is the right of the people to keep and bear arms against tyranny. That's it. It should be up to the responsible gun owner to secure or conceal their firearm the way that suits their personal position. Gun owners support safe storage of firearms, just not the government forcing you to lock your guns up in a specific way. The only way this law is enforceable is if law enforcement or feds make unscheduled visits to millions of homes every year, a fucking waste of resources and tax dollars. Also, the only way for law enforcement or feds to know what guns would be missing from your safe if they had a national gun registry, which again is unconstitutional and a horrific idea. Criminals aren't going to lock up their guns because they don't care, but if you get your gun stolen, you should suffer the consequences. So if my car or kitchen knives are stolen and used in a crime, should I get charged? Your house should be considered a safe, locked domicile. Continuing to charge law-abiding citizens for getting their private property stolen is downright evil. Oh no, this sign says no guns are allowed on the premises. Guess I'll have to do some evil deed somewhere else, said no criminal ever. If you just follow the 4 rules of gun safety, you'll be ready to purchase a firearm, in my opinion. Training is great. Being able to use your firearm most effectively and safely is a positive to all of society. Mandating training before owning a gun legit locks financially strained individuals out of their right to self-defense guaranteed by the Second Amendment. Supporting this position means that you agree that the government should be able to dictate who should own a gun based off of their experience, turning your rights into a privilege that can be revoked at any time. If the people who argue for mandatory training, why do they target quote-unquote militia-style training with legislation. It's not about wanting citizens to be safer with guns, which everyone wants. It's that a significant amount of gun grabbers don't want citizens to have guns at all.
Second Amendment's not absolute. When it was passed, you couldn't own a cannon. You couldn't own certain kinds of weapons.
Yes, you could own one back in the day, and you can own one today. You got a problem with that? So having a pistol grip or an adjustable stock to make the shooter more comfortable makes the gun more dangerous for the others? I can't believe I have to say this, but a pistol grip doesn't make the bullet bigger or fling faster. If somehow you think that no one should be able to handle a gun that is more ergonomic and potentially safer for the handler, I give up all hope for you. The 1994 assault weapon ban did jack shit. Wow, shocking, isn't it? A majority of studies showed that there wasn't any discernible or conclusive evidence that showed a decrease in firearm deaths or tragedies. Oh no, but no, it would have worked if we just let it run longer. This is like communists saying, that wasn't real communism, we need to try again. You had over a decade to show that there was any positive data to come out of this ban, but there was no data at all. And good luck passing that federal shit again when most guns banned in the law are still in common use today. Big ups to George W. Bush for not giving a crap at all and allowing the law to expire. The globalist citizen group of arguments are few and far between in real life, but are heavily prevalent online. Usually these arguments are used by people who immigrated, visit, or just have no relation at all to the United States. They'll hurl out these points or ideas to try and dunk on America's problems while talking about how great their country of origin is. These arguments are meant to show that the rest of the world solved their gun problems and believe that America should follow in their footsteps. They will shill points from their state-funded media and even the United Nations to hopefully make American gun owners give in. Only problem is most gun owners don't give a shit when it comes to someone's opinion that's across an ocean. Other than the background of the user of these arguments, they aren't that unique. So let's sift through them quickly. Imagine saying there should be limits on human rights, especially self-defense. Go move to North Korea then. Have fun. Australia is a laughingstock when it comes to their gun legislation. You have to register a gel blaster with the government, a harmless toy. Some of you guys decide to give up your rights for security. Let's see how that's doing. Well, looks like you've had a couple problems. Who would have thought that tyrants would trample on a severely de-armed population? Lastly, Australia isn't America. The genie is already out. Doing a large mandatory buyback that Australia did is nearly impossible due to how many firearms are in the United States already. I highly doubt criminals would engage in a mandatory buyback because they don't follow the law. However, I do give my honest condolences to the gun owners of Australia and other unfree countries. I pray for your countries to turn around on the gun ownership issue. This is probably one of the most underutilized arguments in this video, but probably the most important to discuss nonetheless. The definition on Wikipedia is pretty accurate and straight to the point, so let's take a look. The Arms Trade Treaty is a multilateral treaty that regulates the international trade in conventional weapons. It entered into force on 24th of December 2014. 113 states have ratified the treaty, and a further 28 states have signed but not ratified it. The ATT is an attempt to regulate the international trade of conventional weapons for the purpose of contributing to international and regional peace, reducing human suffering, and promoting cooperation, transparency, and responsible action by and among states. So what's the problem of regulating trade of military goods between two countries? Well, it also wants to regulate the small arms trade, which every pistol, shotgun, revolver, rifle, any weapon that goes pew. Wow, that doesn't sound like a nothing burger to me. This sounds like the beginnings plans of an unironic globalist government. This would also mean that if things didn't go to plan and people refused to comply with these awful regulations, the blue helmets could possibly come in to maintain the peace. This is a gigantic rabbit hole that gets way more complicated and, in my opinion, evil the more you dive into this. It honestly needs its own video. Last thing I can really say about this is, do you really want a country like China telling you what you can and can't buy for self-defense? It actually isn't. Individuals like myself aren't obligated to disclose jack shit to you. America has incredible strategic land. It's honestly just a matter of time before someone makes a move. Maybe a decade to a century away, but the military, police officers, and armed civilians will be ready for whatever hardships come their way. I wonder what that billboard means, or what this guy said.
А Америка пускай всегда помнит. Там есть часть ее территории, Аляска. Вот когда они начинают пытаться распоряжаться нашими ресурсами за границей, прежде чем это делать, подумают, что нам есть что тоже возвращать.
One of the most common arguments used by anti-gunners, but since it smells of globalist and smug superiority from other countries, I grouped it into this iceberg section. Mass pooping events are heavily inflated in the United States, including gang crime in Chicago and shootouts with policemen. That's why you get bonker numbers in these anti-gun funded studies. In countries that have banned guns, the criminals just use knives, swords, and things I cannot mention that can be made at Home Depot or a 3D printer. These events happening in gun-free paradises are equal or even more deadly than some American mass poopings. You can semi-make the argument that mass pooping with a gun is a uniquely American thing, but every country has multiple just as deadly unreported mass casualty events every year with guns and other weapons. It was just swept under the rug because it doesn't fit the anti-American rhetoric that some of the world loves to eat up. Because I don't need a license for freedom of speech, privacy, to not be a slave, so why should I need a license to be able to defend myself with whatever gun I decide? The instant you set in place a license, that's you admitting it's at the government's discretion on who owns a gun. This negatively affects all Americans and does not affect the people who will steal or obtain guns anyway. Remember that crime guns recovered in Illinois were mostly from Illinois, a state where you need a FOID card, aka a license to possess a gun. So if licensing work, then where the hell are they getting their guns then? The answer is through illicit means like stealing them or purchasing them on the black market. These nefarious statements and arguments come out when possibly any one of the previous groups shown in this video are backed in a corner, and these people let you know what they're really thinking. What are they thinking, you may be asking? Well, they're thinking about how enjoyable the downfall of gun ownership will be when tyranny comes. They will bask in the rays of pro-tyrannical talking points, all because you think that self-defense is a civil right. While very easy to combat these arguments, these really make you think, why are you saying this? Do you actually want this? Again, I have to be really careful with rebuting these specific arguments because of YouTube, so let me be very clear. Most gun owners, myself included, aren't begging things to be escalated to extremes like these people think we want. We just want to be left alone. However, there may come a day that I hope for God that will never happen, that comes to threaten our democracy, and we as citizens will protect our country if we're needed. Now with that out of the way, we can look into the last set of argument points on the iceberg.
I find it ironic that you talk about how lethal the AR-15 is in one respect with respect to and outgunning police officers, but then in the same breath says it will do nothing to fight back against a tyrannical government.
With nuclear weapons and airplanes? Correct.
Do you know, so you're saying that our government would nuke the American people?
Not a single government or tyrannical threat in the world would want to rule over a nuclear landscape. This argument is stupid. so a potential tyrannical government vying for power will glass a whole city over someone keeping their guns is completely dumb. This would receive global outrage and rightfully question, what the hell were you smoking that day when you came to that decision? By this same logic, every insurgency group should have lost instantly due to them have been primarily armed with small arms. How well did that work in Vietnam, Afghanistan, and other countries? I like how the AR-15 or any other type of semi-auto rifle is too dangerous and too weak for civilians to own at the same time too. If you think we're too weak, does this mean we need to own tanks and jets? Wait, that sounds good. I like the sound of that. The mental gymnastics of these people are truly something else. You do realize members of the military and law enforcement have souls, right? They all took an oath to protect citizens' rights and safeguard the idea of American democracy. A tyrannical government despises both of these. Americans without a question would lay down their lives for the Constitution and the rule of American sovereignty. Heck, we stood up over a tea tax because of the lack of political representation. So yes, most of us will lay down our lives over their rights, especially our right to self-defense. I know a lot of you are thinking, there's no way these words were uttered by someone. Well, you'd be shocked to know I'm not pulling your leg. This was a real statement from a real article that has been taken down for obvious reasons. God put us on this earth to freely choose to spread God's law to others and ask for redemption as flawed individuals through the sacrifice of his only son, Jesus. Tyrants and criminals trampling on our God-given rights hinder that. I honestly have nothing else to say about this dog shit. But if you want to hear more about this gem, check the video description for a link to a Reno May video going over this horrendous article. Well, it looks like we have reached the end of this iceberg, and it's time to wrap up this long video. Thank you for watching this video all the way through. I normally don't ask, but if you did like the video, please consider subscribing. I would greatly appreciate it. If you think I missed an important argument or think there could have been another approach to one of these arguments, feel free to tell me in the comments. The amount of time I spent making this video was insane, but all worth it in my opinion. Although I might not make a video this long for a while for my own sanity. But until next time, this is Wubba Bubba signing off again.
Attached here, it turns this weapon into an automatic weapon. It becomes a bump stock. And so it will allow that to essentially be fired like an automatic weapon. That's the danger. So I have to very strongly oppose the amendment. And I yield back.